Hi, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Wherever you find us, whether it's a video on YouTube or on your favorite podcast platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms where I give you a heads up about upcoming shows and which date and time they will be aired. If you go to MiamiGhostChronicles.com, you can find links to the shows, MP3 files which you can download, or links to your favorite platform like iTunes, Spreaker, SoundCloud, and all other major sources. You can find information for upcoming and past talk show appearances as well as new book projects at MarlenePardo.com. You can also purchase books and merchandise there, and you can visit my author page on Amazon at Marlene Pardo Pellicer. Due to popular demand, I'm narrating my True Believer stories that I've collected throughout the years in a new series called Supernatural Storytime. You can find links at supernaturalstorytime.com. If you are into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate some of those at Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If you would like to read noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird, you can visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at MiamiGhostChronicles.com. I do want to thank you all for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi everybody, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural. How's everybody doing? Good, I hope. Everything is good here, and I know you're not going to be hearing this for just a little bit, but now we're into November, what I call the home stretch of the year, and of course in South Florida, we're barely in the 70s, which is kind of cool, but it's still, crazy weather here in the sense that it's hot. I look at the news and, you see up in these northern states, it's like so cold, and down here we're still, and everybody's always asking me how the farm is going. And now, as a matter of fact, is when I start doing my hard work, because since we finished with the rainy season, then I've got 100 trees that I got to keep watered. And so believe it or not, this is when I do a lot of my hard work, which is to make sure that I get my trees watered. Because even though they're a year old, they still haven't, gone down and basically hit the aquifer that we have here in Florida. And, and again, and I mentioned this the other day, and I want to say it again. I can't get over how quick they're bringing in the Christmas stuff. It was like, here we are, everything is Christmas. And don't get me wrong, I love Christmas, but it was like, we were barely out of August and everything was Christmas. It was like, well, what happened to everything in between? And, and we're going to mention this subject I'm going to bring up. We'll discuss it with our guest in a minute, which is almost like that they want to pass over Thanksgiving. Like, what happened to Thanksgiving? It was almost like before Thanksgiving was the kickoff for Christmas. Even though, you would see Christmas here, Christmas there, or autumn stuff. Usually it was like, okay, Thanksgiving is come and gone. Now is when we're really getting into the Christmas stuff. And it's almost like they want to put Thanksgiving off on the sidelines. And I have a problem with that. But anyway, let me tell you the really exciting stuff, which is who our guest is tonight. And this is someone who's been here before, and I'm so happy to have him back. His name is Bill Bean, Reverend Bill Bean, and he is, of course, for those of you who are not familiar with him, which is hard to believe, he is a deliverance minister and an exorcist. He travels throughout the United States helping individuals and families to arrive at solutions to cases of demonic possession, oppression, curses, and extreme hauntings. He has helped people worldwide in over 40 countries, also via Skype. He does a lot of extensive traveling on site, but he's not limited to that. He also can help those, this is the good side of technology for those that are in another country. And one of the things that Bill has done recently is he redid his book, Dark Forces Revisited. This is his story about his own, what happened with his family. And like we were talking before we started recording, he has a better understanding. And he says even some details now are easier for him to recall, which is why he went ahead and he re-edited the book and brought it out. But anyway, help me to welcome Bill back. How are you doing, Bill?
I'm doing great, Marlene. Thank you so much for having me back. It's always a pleasure to be on with you.
No, it is my pleasure, on the contrary. And we were talking, you said like that you're traveling all over the place.
Yeah, nonstop.
Nonstop. And I'm sure that everybody presents with different cases. I'm sure when they come and they contact you. Let me ask you, is there a threshold or something that you say, okay, I need to be there in person if I can? Is there something that you would say has to be a benchmark that you say this cannot be handled remotely?
Yeah, I mean, the power of God could do anything, and we praise Him for that. But there are some times that how can I say this? I don't claim to be anyone or anything, so I don't claim any special powers, or I don't claim to be special at all. I'm just somebody that God works through to do great things, and I praise God for it. It's Him, it's not me. So, with that said, I have to maintain a super close and personal relationship with God, and therefore my connection with God always has to be strong. And so, again, that said, I rely on spiritual discernment from God to guide me per each case and individual. And if God is putting it on my spirit that I need to be there in person with someone or family, well, then that's exactly what I'll do, and then I'll say that to those people. And yes, you're right, like in the introduction, I've helped hundreds of people via Skype, and people in over 40 different countries, and I praise God for that. But I've also helped hundreds more in person, all over the United States, and continue to do so. And it's the greatest thing in the world, A, to know what your purpose is in life, and B, that God actually is working through me to take this evil garbage out and off and away from people, and then they have this miraculous transformation to where they go from victim to victor, just like God did for me. So it is the greatest feeling in the world, Marlene, to know that somebody has actually had their life transformed in that way.
Well, and you mentioned something really important, which was that I'm sure that when you were enduring these things in your childhood and with your family, you sometimes, of course, you don't see beyond it, but you yourself have said those experiences has helped me now to who I am and my understanding.
I totally agree. I could not be here where I'm at right now had I not been there. It was a necessary part of my journey. We all have a journey in life, and everybody's been down the long and hard roads in some way, shape, or form throughout their lifetime. And I could not be here as this spiritual warrior, God working through me to help these people, had I not been there to be victimized and to suffer and to experience just about anything that you can imagine in a paranormal, supernatural type of way.
Right. And the reason why I mentioned this is that sometimes people, when they have these experiences similar, or like you said, they feel like victimized, or sometimes they don't understand, like, why me? Why is this happening to me? Especially if it's something that they didn't do it looking for it. They weren't dabbling. It just happens, for whatever reason, and they can't figure out why, like God's picking on me, or why is this happening to me? And it's just sometimes, I guess, that we can't see the whole road. We don't see what's around the curve for us. And at that moment in time, it feels like for some people, I'm living under a cloud, or they don't see any good coming out of it at all, ever.
You're absolutely right. And so this is why it's invaluable for me to be in this position that God has placed me in. I didn't seek this out. I didn't want to do this. God called me to do it. And so I perfectly, it makes perfect sense to me now. And I could go to anyone or to any client or family's home, and they realize that I've had horrific experiences, and I know what it's like to suffer. And then all of a sudden, the wall, comes down, because when people have suffered high levels of trauma they don't trust anybody, and they don't want to talk about it.
Yes.
They try to bury it. It's so painful that they can't even bring it up. However, it is necessary to come up, because if it doesn't come up, then that will give the devil legal right to be there. So we must get these things up, out, and off, and that's where my job comes in, and my calling from God working through me to get to. I mean, I was just to a family 2 days ago in Virginia, wonderful people, and they were suffering in a severe way, and I don't want to go into the details because I respect my client's privacy, but some people will talk about these things, and others they don't. They want to keep it private. But let me tell you, there was a high degree of suffering there. Evil was present there. And God worked through me to take all of that and break all of that off of them. And it was so great, just such a great feeling to know that they were okay. And I was on a show last night. And a recent family that I had helped in Seattle, they did want to talk about it. And Frank and Cheryl are wonderful people, love them dearly. And I went out there a couple of weeks ago, and they too were having severe demonic problems, and family of four, and so it was Frank and Cheryl's daughter, and Cheryl's sister, and they had all suffered horrifically from childhood into their adult years. They carried that around with them for many, many years, and the major attack was taking place against the daughter, and let me just say this, that had I not gotten there when I had gotten there, tragedy could have come out of that. And so I am just overjoyed to tell you that God really did work through me to take all that evil and negativity and all those strongholds and curses and hexes and vexes and spells off of them. It was an exhaustive process. That's because I had to perform 4 separate deliverances for each of them. And
was this like a family, was this something that was attached to the family line?
Let's just say yes. It was a family bloodline curse, and it was affecting them in a horrific way, and they had all suffered, from childhood up. And they are doing great. And Frank and Cheryl came on that show last night, and just it gave me chills. My heart just, I can't describe the feeling, Marlene, in knowing that they're okay and they're going to be okay. So people hear me say praise God all the time. I'm not some carnival bucker, televangelist, or whatever. I'm real, and the power of God working through me is real. And so when I say praise God, I mean praise God, because He is worthy of 24/7 praise.
Right, and people don't realize that, like I said, when they're going, like you said, years, because it sounds like something that happened to this family, and I'm sure like others that you've encountered for years sometimes, that they try to, and by this I'm not saying, they go to mental health counselors, they even go to regular MDs. They go through all the secular avenues.
Go to mental health counselors, they explored all the avenues.
And I even hate to say, a lot of them sometimes end up getting medicated, all for years later to realize it's being held together like a Band-Aid, and that's I'm sure that's when they arrive on your doorstep, and people don't realize that. And I hate to say this because it sounds very trite. But that saying about hitting the bottom of the barrel when you surrender, when you say, I'm willing anything, whatever whatever you say to do, I will do it. Okay? Because they are willing, they realize at some point, and I want to say almost contrary to what they even suspect spiritually, that this is not going to be taken care of by therapy or by medicine, as in, medication. Or like what you said, I'm just going to pretend it never happened. We won't talk about this.
Right. Let's sweep it under the rug.
Let's sweep it under the rug because it always comes back up. And I think that's what happens. That's why, like you said, that people say, how could a family or an individual go years and years? And you'd be surprised how long people can either move around from house to house, depending, and it'll follow them, or they learn how to manage it. And I want to say, I hate to say it, I'm sure there's people out there that never they go through their whole lives basically enduring it, because they never want to talk about it. Or they feel ashamed,
Yeah.
like they think it's something's wrong with me or with my family, instead of reaching out for help, let's say to somebody like you, and which I'm sure you don't. You know, you're not there to judge them in the sense of,
No.
hey, this is all your fault.
No. And a lot of these people, Marlene, I'm sorry to say, the most common thread in all of this, not in every case, but in a large percentage, goes back to childhood, and the link is child molestation.
Yes.
And so when these types of wicked and heinous acts take place, of course, the perpetrator absolutely is demon-filled to be able to carry out such wicked, heinous, vile acts. But then, unfortunately, after the act takes place, then the demons are drawn to the victim. And why? Because the victim has just been exposed to a high level of trauma, which now has caused blood and secretions to come out from the pineal gland and the adrenal glands. And so that's actually the most powerful drug on the black market, called adrenochrome. And demons are drawn to that like candy, so they will stay on the victim after that. And it's just so sad. And so, yes, people carry these things around for many years until someone like me comes along, God working through me, and then we can put a stop to it. And then it's time for the person to be free and to move forward in what I call warrior mode.
Yes. And I think that what happens also, Bill, and like you said, when people have that type of trauma, especially as a child, there comes a point where, you know, people have to accept it. And by this, people say, oh, forgiveness. No, I'm not saying forgiveness, or that you can't travel back in time and redo it. But you can't stop being victimized by it. And people don't realize that, like you said, chances are that whoever victimized this child, whether it was a caretaker, a parent, a stranger, whatever, they themselves might have been influenced demonically, because I think that the aim of evil, and I'm going to put evil as in with a capital E, its thing is to cause human suffering, agony.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And it's almost like, you know, and I'm not going to say all the time, but a lot of times it's like a ripple effect. The person that was victimized becomes a victimizer, especially if there was no one there to help them. And it's almost like it's like a ripple effect. It affects those around them, and it's almost like this is like if I let's say a demon says I can victimize this child, okay, not only will I hold it hostage, possibly depending, unless they've run into somebody like you and they reach out, for the rest of their lives, and then of course all the interactions this person will have with all those around them. And hopefully, but it does happen where they then become the victimizer, and it just stretches out. People don't realize it's like a ripple effect, and that this is how evil works, and that they need, and for lack of a better word, the human host to do this, to basically have this evil done to other human beings. All right, and it's
a vicious cycle. Yeah, it's a vicious cycle of evil, and the devil, he certainly takes great joy when these types of cycles, repeat over and over and over again.
Yes, and I have a lot of experience in this field. I'm not going to go into, but I have a lot of extensive experience firsthand, and which is why I asked you. I've seen, unfortunately, multi-generational effects of it. All right, especially even among the generations that are still alive. But then when you talk to some of them, they will tell you some of their family history, and you're like, okay, but there's something here that wants to keep you in its grip, and by extension, and everybody that comes into the family is born into the family, married into the family, etc., etc. And it's incredible sometimes how long this can go on, until, like you said, they contact somebody like you. And they can break that cycle and say, that's it. This will not keep going forward through us. But you have to be, I want to say, whether it's an individual or it's a family, depending. Because I will tell you something, Bill, and I'm not going to say this happens all the time, But in my experience, you'd be surprised how sometimes one traumatized person will end up getting in a relationship or married. Sometimes to
Oh yeah, the cycle
people,
repeats. Yeah,
to somebody that has a similar background,
yeah.
almost. And it's
Hmm.
like, what are the chances? And I think that that's not coincidental, in other words.
Not at all. That's what the devil wants. He wants to
Yes,
keep that person enslaved
yes, yes, yes.
to
And
that type of situation over and over again throughout life.
yes. And people will say, and I'll say, you know what? Coincidences, of course, always exist, but I've seen it in my own experience where it's like, this is not coincidental. The odds are too high.
Hmm.
Where there's like
I
a
agree.
special attraction. And sometimes they'll even do this with more than one person, which has nothing to do with looks, physical looks. It has nothing to do with that. There's just something there that kind of like magnet to steel will
Yeah,
attract them because of this trauma, this shared trauma, this common denominator that they have. And of course, let's say we're talking a couple that have children, and it's almost okay. Then, of course, if you have children, and then it's still, again, and like you said, it hasn't been resolved, and it gets
hmm,
visited on the next generation, even though they might have not had, even though they might not have been victimized, but I'm sure you've seen it. People that have had that trauma, alcoholism,
oh yeah,
substance abuse, all
sure.
these things, and of course, then it's visited on their children because if you're a parent and you're a caretaker, you could love your child, but you're in the grip of, let's say, an addiction. Your best intentions or love towards your child go by the wayside. You see what I'm
I totally
saying?
agree. I totally agree. And so this is why it's so important for people to really consider making God first in their life and having a real and
Yes,
authentic and
yes,
personal connection with God.
yes, yes, and
And
absolutely.
once that happens, then you will, in developing a real connection and a strong connection, you'll have that level of holy discernment to know what to do because God will guide us in that way. So that's why it's so important for us to really consider it. Look, I can't twist anybody's arm to do
Of course
anything,
not.
but what I can do is share the truth with people and say, look, this is what God did for me, this is how God saved me, and this is what God does for me and through me now for others. That's all 100% true.
Yes,
So
yes.
this is, the testimony and the seeds that I can plant with people, and then it's up to them from there.
Well, exactly. And like you said, ultimately, we all always have free choice in everything, even
Yeah,
that. Whatever people don't realize, that no, you always have a choice. They might not be the
and
best choices, but you
that's
always
why
have a
there's an
choice.
adversary to mankind in the first place. He's there because of our free will. So,
Yes,
this has
yes.
really worked out in God's perfect plan and way of doing things. I feel that God knew the devil, Hasatan, Satan, whatever you want to call him,
Mm-hmm.
was going to rebel. And so, he was a son of God. He was created. He's a created being. So, I always say this to people. Just imagine now, the devil, he wants to ascend to the heights of the Most High.
Right,
Well, he was created by him. So, he would
right.
love to have that level of
Mm-hmm.
greatness and adulation, but, it'll never happen because there's no way that he could be anywhere near God, Yahweh. There's
Mm-hmm.
no way because he's a created being. So he is, to me, he's like a rebel son. And God doesn't destroy him because
Mm-hmm.
he actually serves a purpose. And his purpose is, again, to be the adversary to mankind because of our free will. So when we make some bad choices, there's going to be a consequence, and he's going to be right there to amplify and magnify that. So I say that from birth, I believe that Yahweh assigns angels to each and every one of us. Well, the devil copies everything that God does, and he puts a vulgar twist on it, so I believe that he assigns demons to people as well. They just look for openings. And
Yes.
whenever there's an opening, they are going to kick that door in, and then
Mm-hmm.
big problems are going to follow afterward.
Of course. And you mentioned before we started recording that you've always very busy, but you've seen an uptick in cases. And I'm going to ask you
Yeah,
something because, and I'm in my 50s, so I tell everybody, I remember when movies or anything having to do with the devil or evil or Satan or Lucifer was in a very negative, and he was ugly and scary. And
yeah,
I think that lately, like what they did with the vampires, that they went from being scary to they made them sexy.
yep,
And they've kind of done the same thing with Satan. They've
have.
made
Look at
him
that
like
TV show that was on Lucifer.
yes,
That was
right.
he was the cool guy. He got all the girls. He had a nightclub. He wasn't
Right.
such a bad guy after all. And that's what the theme is now in our world,
Yes.
is to glorify the devil and evil, and the scriptures tell us, woe to those who call evil good and good evil, and that's exactly what is happening now. Everything is becoming upside down, and so this next generation that's coming along here, they won't know any different, and they'll say, oh, well, see, he's not such a bad, he's just misunderstood.
Right.
And that's how people are being led away from God in droves, and they will accept the devil and his minions and these agendas that he has on the earth, and the masses will blindly accept them because they won't know any better. And what does God say? My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. So it is our responsibility and obligation to seek. And Jesus said, seek and you shall find, and the truth will set you free. So, again, we should be doing these things, but there are so many diversionary tactics in our society that
which
leads
is
people away from God.
And that was a point I was going to, that we get, because let's face it, people, especially now with media and everything, internet, TV, and everything, people, like you said, they give this personification, like you said, in that show Lucifer, where he's a cool guy, and and believe it or not, and if you listen to it, he's only guilty of asking in other words, he gives you what you really want. In other words, you asked for it, but they really make him evil. You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
It's
absolutely.
And there's a lot of other, even in this show that's been running for a long time, Supernatural. Same thing. They give evil like almost like this persona that is like almost human-like, and I'm thinking to myself, there's nothing human about that.
Isn't that amazing? And there will be, especially young people that will take that in and embrace that.
Yes.
And then it becomes a brainwash, and it becomes a mind conditioning, so there's nothing that you or I could say to sway their thoughts in any way, shape, or form, because they would say, you're crazy. No, it's not that at all. It's this, because I see it on TV all the time, and this is what they say.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's only if you're a certain age, and I've seen the transition. Like I tell them, I remember when Stephen King came out with Salem's Lot, that the vampire was horrible looking. It's like, who would, and then of course they massaged his image, like his publicist, and he was tall, dark, and wow. And it was like, okay, how did he go from being the vampire in Salem's Lot to the other versions that came out like after the 1970s, etc.
It's just amazing. I mean, it is, again, a glorification. So if you're glorifying something like this, well, then it becomes attractive in a sense. And so then, people are attracted to that, and they go, oh, wow, okay, well, this is actually pretty cool.
Right. Let me ask you,
do you think
that has something to do with the more activity, the cases that you've been called to? Do you think that's part of it? Not all of it, but part of it. Okay.
It is part of it. Now, part, again, is what we talked about earlier, where, people have really gone through levels of high trauma, and whether that is through molestation, rape, some type of violent beatings, or even severe mental abuse. It can cause to trigger all these types of, reactions and get a person into that high level of stress. However, in a lot of cases, yes, people are being conditioned, and furthermore, I also believe that when people are taking in that type of programming, believe me, TV is called programming for a reason. It's mind programming. This comes from the military-industrial complex, and people should do some studies on this. So when people are taking in programming, the devil and his minions can travel through the airwaves. Again, the scriptures say the devil's the prince of the power of the air. That means the airwaves. So literally, these things can come into your home when you're watching and taking in certain things. Why? Because of free will and invitation, knowingly or unknowingly, willingly or unwillingly. Just the fact of something with that type of content being on could give the devil enough legal right to send demons to come through and then to come upon someone and their household.
Right, and which is because I understand perfectly well, absolutely what you're talking about, trauma, childhood trauma, whatever the once systematic, whatever the case. But I was also looking at it from the aspect of what you said, the invite. You're putting out the invite, and I said people sometimes think of an invite as in RSVP, and it's like there's different ways of putting out an invitation, especially at a metaphysical plane, as in what you just explained.
And some of these very same people, Marlene, would say, no, I never did that. I never said that. Well, yeah, when you go back and look at it, yes, you did. And so we have to be very, very careful in everything that we do. And so this is why I say say to them, I caution them against following their heart. That saying, follow your heart. Well, that's not true. We should be following our mind because our heart is based on emotion. So if we follow the heart, well, then we're following something on emotion and impulse, which is not good. So we have to step back and take a deep breath and then follow our mind, because we have to soundly think about things before we make the decision to do something. So the devil knows this, and this is why he capitalizes on people that make those impulsive decisions. And then, boy, oh boy, once it's done, it's done, and then you're somewhere else, and you're going to have it removed in some way, shape, or form, and usually it's by someone like me, God working through me to come along and get rid of that garbage.
Yes, and I would say, like you said, that they, for lack, I'm going to use the word because I think it's the most appropriate. People are seduced into this.
Yes, it's a perfect word.
Because
that's what it is.
Yeah. And it's funny because supposedly when you're in your teenage years or nowadays, I hate to say you're an adolescent to your 30s or whatever, but you're so wanting to be independent. I'm an adult, I'm grown up, I do what I want, and it's not really, that's what you think, but in many cases, like you said, they're impulsive or they don't stop to think, this is not going to be in my best interest.
Exactly. And then furthermore, now think about this. You have these quote unquote that it's mind-boggling, Marlene. It's mind-boggling. Some of these people, and they're elevated into places of idol worship.
Yes.
And they are open about worshiping the devil and open about trying to get others to follow them in that.
Yes.
And they are succeeding in some cases.
Yes. It's incredible. I want to say it's like there's so many angles that I'm thinking, even as a parent nowadays, you have to be, you always have to be vigilant for your children. That's goes without saying. But now it's like they put this extra layer that you have to be vigilant about everything they say, because everything comes sometimes it's disguised. Yeah.
I totally agree.
I'm gonna give you, and I know some people out there are gonna go, Marlene. This movie that came out now, Maleficent, which is the wicked stepmom or the wicked, of the fairy tale, which was always the villain. All stories have a villain, and now she's been turned into the heroine. But if you look at the storyline, it's almost like it's couched into feminism, where before the princess had to be rescued by the prince, she doesn't need the prince anymore and now the witch, Maleficent, who was the one that was evil, is actually the good person, And it's what happened?
Right back to what we said earlier. It's a glorification of evil. So the scripture says, woe to those who call evil good and good evil, and that's where we are right now. So there's an agenda to really, how can I say this? They call it toxic masculinity. So men like me, they want to be rid of. They want the sissified, effeminate, subservient
Yes.
man that'll just curl up in the fetal position,
Yes.
and then they're trying to make the woman, the strong and dominant one, and all this. And this is totally out of order with God.
No.
This is what the devil wants. He
Yes.
reverses everything, and that's what's taking place here. So you have, again, these, and let me say this, and I've been saying it for years, those types of movies and productions from Disney and all these other, they're evil. They are totally evil. They are mind programming for children. And parents should really study about all of this before they allow their children to watch these kinds of things, because if you really study about it, there are many disturbing things like witchcraft and Satanism and sex, that are programmed and lumped into this that people, and certainly children, don't realize what they're seeing. But it's all there. You just have to do some research. And, if people want to know the truth, it's going to require them to dig a little bit. And, the truth will set you free. Seek and you will find. And for me, I'd rather know the truth any day than live in a lie. And it's unfortunate that a lot of people don't share in that they'd rather live in the lie and say, okay, well, it's not affecting me or my household, so I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. Well, let me tell you something. Eventually, it will affect you and your household.
Well, see, and this is the thing that people don't realize that, again, the message, the underlying message is put into the movies or show or whatever, and on the face of it you think, oh, it's just a story. But then, and I'm going to give you for example, especially when your children are younger. I remember when my kids were younger, this was back in VHS DVD times, I would buy them because my kids would watch movies over and over and over and over and over and over. I could have recited like Lady and the Tramp. I knew all the songs because my kids were watching these shows over and over. Now, can you imagine if you're taking these movies or these shows that your children, let's say you bought the series of the DVDs or whatever, and they're watching them
programming
over and over and over and over and over and over and over again.
Absolutely, and it's there. All that is by design. So even if we're looking at something and there's some type of hypnotic suggestion placed in that, which it happens all the time in commercials especially, even though we don't see it or perceive it, our mind does and takes it in, and that suggestion is already absorbed into our brain. And so believe me, the devil knows what he's doing, and his minions and the human minions on this planet that and I was just saying this last night, I truly believe that certainly our world leaders, they're not in charge of anything. I think that the real leaders of this earth are not even human at all. And these world leaders are just puppets, and they just take their directives from these, whomever they are. And I really believe that's what's going on, and that's why chaos in the world, because this is part of an invasion. This is part of turning man against each other to where it's divide and conquer tactics, and then it's easy to just conquer everybody after a period of time. And I believe that's where we're headed. I pray that God would have mercy on us, but he's not going to lift a finger until we decide that we want to come back to him and make him first. And if you read the Old Testament, you'll see the theme over and over and over again, where the people turned against God and they just did their own thing. And so then God would send somebody to warn them. And in the case of Nineveh, that was Jonah and the whale. And Jonah, he hated the Ninevites. He didn't want to go and warn them about anything. But God had him to go there and warn them that if they didn't turn from their wicked ways and come back to him, that he was going to destroy them. And Jonah went there, and the king, he spoke with the king, and the king certainly believed him, and the king made changes, and the people did come back to God, and God spared them. But 100 years later, they went back to their wickedness, and God destroyed them.
Well, it's people don't realize, and I'm going to go back to something you said, Bill. I'm a trained hypnotherapist, and people don't realize what you said about the movies, that certain tone, certain beats will put you in a suggestible. And something really important people don't realize, high degrees of anxiety will put you in a hypnotic trance. People think that for you to be hypnotized, you have to be like, when you see people with their eyes closed, no, you could be with your eyes opening and seemingly function, and you could be in a deep hypnotic state. Okay, high levels of anxiety will put you. And that's why certain movies, and I tell something, okay, think all these blockbusters. Now remove the soundtrack and tell me if the impact is the same on the movie. Just pull back, pull out the music, take out the beats, especially some of those beats that are done that that heighten the feel. Depending on what the movie is, of course. But whether it's a cliffhanger or whatever.
You're a woman, Marlene. That's exactly right, and most people don't understand that.
Yeah, when they become immersed in that. By the way, I love movies. I'm not by this. I'm not saying ruin it for everybody, because some of these scores are beautiful. Some of these scores are absolutely beautiful, but there's others depending on the theme of the movie. And I want to say especially later on, that they have certain beats that will immerse you, and put you in a hypnotic trance. Okay.
Absolutely.
And
look, all life operates on frequency and vibration. They know this.
Yes. And and I'm gonna go down I believe that sometimes I think that sometimes we're given too much fear by our society, and I know everybody's different. Some people are more worried, will worry more than others. I know your personality has a lot to do with how you take in, but I think that the reason that sometimes we're driven with all these fearsome things is to put us in a state of anxiety, of continuous anxiety, so that thereby we're very suggestible. Because the thing is, yes, we're supposed to handle stress. Nobody leaves a perfect life, and things happen, and you stress and you resolve them. That we're equipped to handle that. But when you're bombarded with these high levels of stress, sometimes over things that you think I have no control over, like what you were saying, especially problems that look not only on an individual basis, but overall to society, something inevitable. You feel, oh my God, how can this is inescapable, but you get hit with that day after day. That's why you hear so many people are anxious or on meds.
That's all by design too.
Exactly.
To have a nation of pill junkies, and to where you can, and it's so sad because the pharmaceutical company, they're making billions at the expense of the people, and meanwhile the people become enslaved because they rely on this now, so they've got to have it, and it's and a lot of these meds are addictive. So once you get the people on that, well, then in a lot of cases there's no coming off of it because they're addicted and they're going to stay on it.
Well, what happens is that it binds to the receptors in your brain. Which is what happens. Let's say you're a drug addict with whatever drug. I'm talking here legal. What happens is it binds to the brain receptors, and this is where you get your reward. In other words, people that are not on, let's say, that abuse drugs, they get a new present, and that makes them happy, like, wow, or they're looking forward to going to, we're going to go do this, wow, because...
It's like a high.
It's but now, when the only thing that makes you happy, you've basically trained your brain to only be happy when you get that drug, for example. Yeah. But the next
You're
thing...
exactly right.
The things that would make you... I'm going to give you a woman perspective. I got a new pair of shoes. They're beautiful. Wow.
Yeah.
You do that to some drug addicts and they don't care. All they want, the only pleasure that they experience in their brain is the drugs. And then, of course, and you leapfrog from illegal to what you said, legal drugs. And and basically it kind of runs your life, and you think you can't manage without it. And I want to segue back into, I think that leaves a person very vulnerable to demonic, whether it's oppression or influence or whatever, the case might be.
Believe it.
It's like almost like a backdoor. And, God forbid, if there is, like you said, a history of trauma for that person, it's like, it can be quite severe.
I totally agree.
Where their life
everything you said is absolutely 100% true.
Now, let me ask you something, Bill. What do you suggest? Because I'm sure you're one person. You cannot be everywhere all the time. Mm-hmm. What do you, I guess, suggest to people when they start either realizing it, becoming aware of it, or basically accepting that they might be tangled in something that's demonic, that's trying to either ruin their lives or their families? What do you think that they should start doing?
they need to get help right away, and whether they contact me or someone else, they need. And here's another sad, unfortunate thing, Marlene, is that some of the clients that I've had told me that they went to their church, to their pastor, or to their priest, and they were turned away. And then these people would say, "What do you want me to do? I'm not trained in that." Can you imagine? I mean, you're claiming to be a man of God, an agent for God, and then you turn people away and say, "Oh, I'm not trained in that. I can't help you," or then dismissed as a crazy person, and those things aren't real. Well, wait a minute. You're up there preaching the Bible, and certainly there's many examples of Jesus casting out demons in the Bible, and so you're standing there supposedly an agent for God, and then you're turning around the other way saying, "Oh, I don't believe in that, and we don't do that, and I'm not trained in that." And it's just sad and unfortunate, but this is what our society has been reduced to. And so it's very sad and unfortunate. Again, I thank God and praise God for having me to be in this position, to be of help to people in this way. And I'll continue to do so, more than likely for the rest of my life, and I praise God for that. But people need help right away, because you can't let something like that go, because it will, through fear and then all the negative emotions that go along with that, this stuff will get empowered, and it will amplify and magnify until there are serious, serious problems.
Right. Well, I as a paranormal investigator, I have run across that scenario where you spoke of, where people, whether it's demonic or not, I'm not saying that they went to clergy and they got that, and they were like, "Oh, it's like they don't believe me." I said, "No, they do believe you." And they're like, "What do you mean?" I go, "They do believe you. But can you imagine if they admit to you, 'I believe you, but I'm so scared myself'?"
Exactly.
That I'll just be dismissive, because what am I going to tell you? I'm supposed to be the person here who should have the faith to go in there and do battle with you, but I'm so scared. So I just rather act like you're a dingbat or you're imagining things instead of.
So it's dismissing the person. Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
They believe it. They don't have. It's not that they don't believe it. On the contrary, they really believe it, and they know what the danger is and what they're combating. But what are they going to say to you when you come here in a very to you? It's in a very serious situation, and do you really think that? I'm sorry, but they're not about to let out that, "Hey, I'm good for regular stuff, regular religious stuff." You know,
but leave me out of that.
Instead of, okay, this I know exists, but I'm scared of it. And by the way, I'm sure that, in other words, I'm scared of it, scared that it's even more powerful than my belief in God. How's that? In my faith.
Isn't that amazing? And, I've been flown to churches in the past, several, to perform deliverances over the pastor, their wives, their family, congregation, the church, the property, because they had demons in the church, and they had demons and curses in on around them and their families. And I was recently on an episode of the Travel Channel series called The Holzer Files, and I was flown there to perform a spiritual deliverance over a lady that was under severe demonic oppression, and she was headed for a full possession and or suicide, and God worked through me to help her and take that from her. I'm happy to tell you that she's had a total transformation in her life, and she's doing very well, and I've heard from her regularly ever since, and I'm just so thankful to God for that. But we had the show had gotten a church, I don't know if they rented it or whatever, from this pastor out there. Very nice man. Enjoyed meeting him. Very good man, nice man, but he told me himself, no way, he's terrified of all that, because I said to him, "Would you like to assist me in this, performing this deliverance?" He said, "No way, I don't want any parts of that, no way, that
and
terrifies me," and all that. So
he backpedaled, I bet, hard. It was like, what? Nope. No.
Yeah.
Now let me ask you something.
Absolutely.
And people don't realize that there's a lot of them out there. By this, I don't mean they're bad people, and they have faith, but ultimately, it's like I said, I've heard of this a lot of times. I even had one gentleman who I said, "Well, you know what? between, he had asked a priest to go out there, and he said the priest was very dismissive, ran in the house, and all he got was really a blessed it, and I'm leaving, and then I said, well, you know what, if you want to in the meantime, because he just called me, and he's, he through a third party, I said, can you go get some holy water? And he told me, well, do I have to tell the priest that I'm going to get the holy, in other words, he had been going, by the way, he had been in that parish for 30 years. Okay. Mm-hmm. In other words, he had been going to church in this parish for a long, and I hate to say it, he was worried about, because of how he was treated by this one priest, that he would be looked at as the weirdo.
Exactly. So there would be negative ramifications against him for getting help.
Right. Amazing. So I said, no, I'm sure you can go and get some holy water from one of the fonts, or if they have a font. I mean, you don't have to. As far as I know, there's nothing that says you need permission to get some holy water.
Exactly.
But he was worried. I was like, what is this? How does that happen? Where you're all of a sudden you're worried that this is a place you go to every Sunday for services, and you don't want to be looked at, because of course to you it's like, if the priest is looking at me like I'm weird, oh, you're that person. Do I really want it to get out that I might have something going on in my house, a haunting or something like this? And that was that really made me very sad when I heard that.
It is sad, because these people and that becomes a brainwash in itself, to where, these people now, they're afraid to ask for anything, so they'd rather just stay in all of the stress and anxiety and torment and attack than to go and try and get help, because they're afraid of somebody getting upset.
Yes. Especially people don't realize that sometimes when people belong to certain churches, especially for a long time, and everybody knows them and they know everybody, they, you have, I don't want to say a reputation, but it's almost like if what's wrong with you is normal stuff. When I mean normal stuff as a non-paranormal, everybody's willing to extend a hand and help you out.
And that's the way it should be. And, before I started this journey of all the travel, I used to hold services in the Baltimore area. Mm-hmm. And that's how I always wanted it to be, that everybody was in this together. We're all in this together, so we need to help each other. And, it's unfortunate in some of these churches of today. People go there, they don't know anybody. They just go there and nobody knows anybody, and especially when you're talking about the bigger churches, nobody knows anybody. So you've got a gigantic room full of strangers, and you don't have anybody, and the pastor or priest, they're supposed to be the ambassador to try and bring these people together. They're not doing it, and so therefore you got a room full of strangers, and nobody wants to do anything to help anybody in any way because everybody's a stranger.
Exactly. There's no ties that bind you, regular stuff, so that when a crisis does come up, then this person is willing. They know you, or they know your family.
Yeah, exactly. So then everybody would step up and say, "Hey, we got to help so and so here."
Exactly.
Because we're all in this thing together.
Exactly. And I've seen that, and of course, when you're talking about what we're talking about here, which is a haunting, whether it's demonic or not, something that this person is coming to grips with, and they realize sometimes, contrary to what we were talking about, the people that go to the religious help as the last thing, these are the people that are willing and ready and able to go in that direction right away, but then they're blocked. They're looked at as in, did you do something, or what did you do, or because the truth is, and I'm sure you've seen it, Bill, this scares a lot of people. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's where the devil, that's his greatest tool, fear.
Yes.
Because, again, it goes back to frequency and vibration. So when we're on high frequency, high vibration, life is good. We are moving forward.
Yes.
And we are blessed. And it is not that we have a perfect life, but we have a very good life.
Yes.
But when a person's on low frequency, and I've been there, believe me, it's as if the black cloud is over somebody's head. Nothing ever goes right.
Yes.
Nothing ever will. There's always a problem, a drama, a situation, and never an answer.
Right. Which ultimately, of course, the aim is to isolate the person, is isolation.
Yeah.
And then it goes downhill from there. Isolation is very bad, and nobody understands me, nobody cares. Sometimes you will even find that even among family members, where you will have, and I've seen this where for some reason some person in the family will experience the majority of the phenomena, to the point that even the other family members kind of start giving them the look like, oh, it's, you're imagining it. And it's, again, the
They
isolation.
can't relate in a sense. Exactly right.
Yeah.
So then it creates more division.
Of course. And it's for lack of a better word, it's called psychological warfare. But
Yes.
On a spiritual level.
It goes hand in hand with the spiritual aspect. And so that's why I say to people, it is essential, it is very necessary that we are strong in mind, body, and spirit.
Yes.
We have to be strong in all three of those facets in life to be able to move forward, truly move forward, without having this kind of torment.
Yes, and people don't realize that, and again, yes, I agree. There are people that sometimes they bring it on themselves because they dabble in things they shouldn't. They go places they shouldn't. They hang out with people they shouldn't. Yeah, I understand that. But sometimes things basically fall on people or families just because they're at the wrong place at the wrong time. Or
Very true.
Yeah, they're really at their wits' end, trying to figure out what's going on, whether it's the place that they lived in or just something. Like I said, being at the wrong place at the wrong time. I mean, it could be a series of things. And again, I like what you said. The first step would be, of course, to reach out to help for somebody, and don't be put off if let's say you do reach out to somebody in the clergy or religious, and they don't, not even if they don't turn you away, but they kind of like make you feel like they kind of poo-poo you, then go find somebody else.
Exactly, and I tell people, look, I'm very, very busy, but I'm never too busy to help somebody. And they can reach out to me anytime. Just visit BillBean.net. You can email me directly from the site, and I'll have somebody get back to you. More than likely to be, my assistant Melinda or my assistant Ma. One of the two will get back very quickly.
Okay.
And we will get you help.
Right, exactly, which is super important. That's, I think, like when I tell people, the first step is to reach out, because you're not a mind reader. They have to take the first step and reach out to you, and then just trust that you'll work it out from there. But unless they reach out to you, then nothing will happen. Exactly
right. So it is essential that the person, when they know that they're going through something like that, just right away say, I want to nip this in the bud before this turns into something very, very bad.
Let me ask you something, Bill. I'm going to have a link to your website, but for my podcast listeners, what is your website address?
My website is www.billbean.net.
Okay. All right. And as far as the book that came out, The Dark Force Revisited, is that available if people want to? Do they go to your website, to Amazon?
Yes.
Okay.
Either one. They can either go to Amazon and purchase a copy, or they can go to BillBean.net and get a copy as well. So it's available either way. If they come to BillBean.net and order from there, I will, if they want me to, I'll personally sign it and send it out to them as soon as possible.
Great, perfect. All right, okay, guys, I'm gonna because, and I'm very conscientious about this because Bill needs his rest. So
we could talk for
I know, but you know what?
Being on with you.
No, but you know what, Bill? I totally understand that there has to, for you to do the work that you do. It's not only spiritual; it's a physical thing as well. You need those boundaries, otherwise, you couldn't be able to do what you do. It would be impossible.
You're exactly right.
Absolutely
right.
Guys, I'll be right back. I'm going to blank out a second because I wanted to tell Bill something important, but this is for his ears only. So hold on. Sit tight just a second. I'm back. Okay. Yeah, no, there was something I wanted to talk to Bill about. Not personally. Well, personally, it's something about that. Some of the work that I've done in the past that I don't share with the public. But he would understand where I was coming from, so I didn't want to record that. But in that book, this is talks about his experiences that he had as a kid, um, which I'm sure a lot of people know who Bill Bean is, but a haunted. There's been various shows that have done that version of what happened to him as a kid and how his family was affected, and him, of course, and it was quite severe. And we were talking where, as difficult as it was when he was having these experiences as a child, especially as a child, okay, there was no way that he could have foreseen that those experiences, as horrible as they were, would serve him in the work that he does now. And the reason I bring that up is not everybody that has horrific childhood or family circumstances. And by this, let me explain something. A lot of people think that childhood abuse has to be something that's done to you, to your body, whether it's physical abuse, sexual molestation, blah, 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 blah. Not necessarily. You could be traumatized as a child by being witness to certain things. Again, once or systematically. Okay? It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be the target of it. But being witness, living in circumstances will victimize you and cause you trauma. And my point being that, not everybody is going to be a person that does what Bill Bean does, okay, which is a ministry, etc., etc. My point being that you could have endured something along these lines, whatever, indirectly, whatever. However, that doesn't mean that you will forever have to live being traumatized and victimized by what happened to you. There comes, like I said, and I was saying, the acceptance part. As people sometimes make the mistake of saying, "Oh, acceptance means it's okay." No, it doesn't. It doesn't. But you will never be able to go back and redo that. That redo button doesn't exist. And some people spend their whole lives trying to look for the redo button. You know how they do it? They engage, they have significant relationships with people that are very similar in characteristics to the people that made them suffer or victimize them. Okay? I'm going to give you for instance. Let's say you were a child that lived in a household where one of your parents or caretakers had an alcohol problem. This person loved you, but they had a serious alcohol problem, and you as a child suffered enormously. Okay? I remember there was a lady. She's an adult now, by the way. And she tells me how her dad had a very severe alcohol problem. By the way, the gentleman, I want to say he was either an electrician or a plumber. He had his own little company where he worked. And he was able to maintain his house, as in he would work. But he had this problem where he was drinking, not like, oh, I'm going to have a drink and pass out on the sofa. He would go on drinking binges. And then by the time he got home, he was raging. Okay. And she would tell me these stories how they lived in this town, which was like down a country. It wasn't like a big populated, but basically they lived kind of rural outside where there was a road. And she says that it was her and her 3 siblings. There was 4 of them. And they kind of already knew the noise of when he got home. Like I said, he would come home raging. And that her and her siblings would slip out one of the bedroom windows. They all knew, everybody was on the same page, and they would run down the road and hang out, and the only one that would stay in the house would be her mom, who kind of handled this. And they already timed it. They kind of knew how long it would take him to basically pass out asleep in the bed. Okay? And then they would all come back into the house, children, I'm not talking teenage. I'm talking children, like 10, 8, 7. That is 4 of them. That they would know, okay, we can go back in the house now, slip back in the same way we did, and everybody go back to sleep. This didn't happen once. But she was telling me this was almost every night for years. Okay? And by the way, her dad loved them his way, whatever. It was taught. They loved their dad. But that's my point of the witnessing part. Okay? That they lived with this, and apparently her mom knew how to handle him, even though it was very combative. But the mother was the first one that knew that they had to run down the road, by the way. Because to her, in her mind was, if I can't protect you in the house, I'm a full grown, in other words, go out. I know that if you're out under that big tree down the road, you're safe. And you guys already know when you can come back. Okay, in other words, this is how much of a routine it was. Again, she grew up, she had, by the time I met her, she had been married to the same man for many years, and they had children and everything. Okay. And luckily, she married somebody who didn't have an alcohol problem. He was a little bit manipulative, a little bit domineering, but who cares at the end of the day? But I've seen very similar circumstances where people, let's say that same scenario, they want the redo button. So they end up with somebody very similar, let's say like what her dad. That you would think, who would want, if you endured this through your childhood, why would you ever subject yourself and possibly your children to the same circumstances? And there's a lot of people that do, because what they're trying to do is they want the redo button. Okay? But I can't actually get my dad, let's say, and I'm going to use the dad as an example in this, like I said in the story. It could be anybody. I can't bring him in, and I can't, time travel is not possible, so I'm going to hit the redo button with this person, who, by the way, physically doesn't have to look. And sometimes even when you meet this person, they don't show all the signs, but there's something in you that knows, that recognizes. Down the road, I will be able to do the redo with this person, because this person will start to behave just like that caretaker that gave me the sense of instability and these people that developed this hypervigilance. Because, come on, you got to run out of your house as a kid and wait till your dad passes out. That right there's the main ingredient for hypervigilance, because you don't know what's going to happen. Even though you kind of, in a way, it's kind of a little bit routine. And then they find themselves in these relationships as adults, very similar, and they can't kind of understand how they end up there again. And even in their conscious mind, they don't get it, but their subconscious mind is doing the redo thing. Okay? And in some cases, and again, it depends, it varies on a lot of things. Okay, when we're coming back to what we were talking about with Bill Bean, as far as what are the outcomes or the results of people when they experience childhood trauma in whatever ways. Everybody's different. I'm sure you've heard it. You'll have siblings, like I described. Some of them will go through some type of trauma, sometimes systematic. When I mean systematic, for days, weeks, months, years. And you'll have some that handle it. Yeah, they got their bumps and bruises maybe in their emotional life, and then you'll got one that's a total wreck. And you'll say, well, or they do horrible things, or they become a criminal, and everybody will say, well, how come these others, they're okay, they handled it, and then there's this one who's like, because everybody's different. Every personality is different. Everybody takes in things differently. All right? That's like, again. So, but, and this is, and sometimes, my point being, when you have something like evil, as an evil E, whether you want, and I'm saying evil because I think this thing with the devil, demon, Lucifer, Satan, it's been so overused that it's been trivialized. So I'm going to put evil as in all encompassing evil, the destruction of the human soul, of innocence, the corruption of a human being. It will target, let's say, that one person, let's say in a sibling group, who is the most vulnerable to destroy. You see what I'm saying? For whatever, because of their personality makeup, maybe when this happened they were the youngest, or it could be so many things. But so sometimes what I'm saying is, yes, sometimes it is a personality thing, as in why this one person seems so affected. But then you also have in the background, you have something that is evil saying, well, of all, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, no, this one right here, this one's softer, this one's easier, this one is more vulnerable, this one I can mold into doing really horrible stuff. Because these others, this is going to be my one. This is the one. Okay. And that is also, it affects all these, like what he was saying, all these experiences do affect you on a body level. Okay. Absolutely. As far as what hormones your brain releases. Okay. And the brain's plasticity and, what you expect. And when I was talking about brain, but on a spiritual level, sometimes you get targeted. And you would think, well, isn't that kind of manipulative? Yeah. But that's what evil is. It's manipulative. Hello. Of course it is. Of course it is. That's why sometimes you'll have one family members that and something I really want to clarify, because people think that you could be a person that, whether you've had trauma, not trauma, or maybe a rough upbringing, whatever, you could be a real jerk. Let's put it bluntly. You could be a real son of a bitch or whatever. But there is something in you that will not allow you to hurt another human being. By this, hurt as in kill, maim, go after what evil wants. Because everybody thinks, oh, so you mean these other siblings, they all are peaches? No, they could be really rough. But evil was unable to get in its grip to where they do the really horrible stuff. You could have some people that you could say, man, wow, that family. Yeah, sometimes they're not the nicest people. They're not. But they would never go out and there's, what's the word I'm looking for? Because people run hot and cold. Sometimes people do stupid and malicious stuff in a moment and they regret it and they realize, but they're not evil. There's no perpetual malice in what they do. Or they have a conscience, or they say, man, that's not right. I'm a jerk, but man, that's not right. There's people there that doesn't have to me like you're like, I'm the nicest, sweetest person all the time. No, there's people out there that are real jerks, but they have a conscience and they can empathize. Oh man, if I do that, I'm not going to do that. The difference is that the introduction of evil into somebody's soul, when it gets a hold of them, let's say we're talking here via childhood experiences, it kind of erases or puts back all the natural things that we have that make you feel sorry for somebody. Like, or you think of, man, if I do that, that's not right. Whether it's to a human being, to an animal, again, and I've told this to people, if you want to see a hallmark of evil, look for somebody that's into destruction versus creation. The person that wants to destroy, I guarantee you, there's something there, either full-fledged or influencing that person. All right? And then, of course, we go, which is part of the book that, he's re-edited, that Dark Force, which is, if I ask everybody to read it, because he even told me, he goes, now looking back, I remember certain details that, as my understanding has grown, I realize, and I've included in the book, things that I didn't have in my original edition, is what are the effects of, and what is the outcome that doesn't have to necessarily be that if you went through these series of traumas in your family, that's it, you're done for, you're never going to get over it. No, on the contrary, read the book, look at what the possibilities are, where this person took all these negative experiences and said, I'm going to use them. I wish I hadn't experienced this, but since I did, I'm going to use them for understanding, and in this case, to help other people. By the way, coming back to what we said, something that even a lot of other people that are involved with religion or religious or spiritual work are afraid of. And I'm going to repeat it. Not because they don't believe it. They do believe it. They really believe it, more than you think. Okay? But they just don't want to come out and tell you, you know what? If you were coming to me for marriage counseling, or because your teenager is giving you grief, I could help you with that. Absolutely. We'll work on that right away. But when it comes to that, am I going to admit to you that I don't have the faith for that? Then you'd be looking at this person and going, wait a minute, I'm coming to you maybe every Sunday or whatever, thinking, for religious instruction or interpretation, or, if this person is giving a sermon or talking to you, or even telling you, do this, don't do that, don't sin, you should be living your life. But wait a minute. So you're not really spiritual. Yeah, it sounds good, but you're not really spiritual, because the whole premise of religion and spirituality is an understanding of what's not, material. Scary, sure. But so you're telling me that you don't have the faith? When he said about that pastor he's saying, hey, come and help me. And the guy's like, If you think that's uncommon, it's not uncommon. It is not uncommon. Okay, it is not uncommon. Because, and by this, it's almost like they themselves recognize, if I go out there and do battle with this, it will recognize that I have a big giant hole in my belief in my God. I don't think they do it recently, but because now, they don't even put religion in vampire movies. It's like, whatever, wish him away. But once upon a time, when they would do, let's say, Dracula movies or vampire movies, where you would be the cross and religious items were like anathema to the vampire. You guys remember Fright Night, okay? The would-be Dracula vampire hunter, James Vincent or Vincent James or whatever, how he takes out the cross and the vampire says, you have to believe in it for it to work. Well, some of these, not all, I don't want to generalize, some of these people that do work in, that are pastors or priests or whatever, they're the Vincent James. And they know it. And they really do believe in evil, and because they know it exists, they're afraid that when they go out there and try to confront it on behalf of a parishioner or somebody that's come to them for help, the devil or the demon or whatever it is, God forbid, like that person is really talking about something really dark and malevolent. It's going to go, oh yeah? You want to tangle with me? Let's see. Because their faith is not there. In other words, they have the limitations, but they're lying to their parishioners. Then you would think, okay, well, then you have to do a lot of soul searching. Are you really supposed to be doing what you're doing? Maybe you should just be a counselor. But don't stand up there in a pulpit and preach and pretend to have a level of faith and belief that you don't have. Because, comes to counseling, marriage counseling, you can go to a counselor. I, you know, I've handled situations where I've done referrals for people that go to want a therapy, and they say, I want a faith-based counselor. And I understand, because for them, spirituality and religion and the religious beliefs is important. They think that it's integral to their therapy. But that relationship is based strictly first on going to a therapist, somebody that understands, the way therapy works. And of course they're integrating religion into it, but it's not the same as somebody that you go see who is a spiritual or church leader for you. Different approach. Okay? And I hope, for anybody that thinks, this will never happen to me. Hopefully it will not, but you never know when, if it's not you, it's really weird. Sometimes things come to where you could, the good deed that you do, okay, is where you learn of, or there's a moment where you could tell a person, for whatever the circumstances, oh my God, this is happening to me, and hey, well, you know what? Have you read this book? Why don't you get in contact? There's a man by the name of Bill Bean. This is his website. Reach out to him. I think he can help you. Yeah. Sometimes that's the way it works. Getting somebody that maybe is isolated, possibly might have been turned away by their religious, or maybe not have any connection to a church or a community or spiritual, or nothing, and they're at their wits' end. And you are that person's guardian angel, because for some reason circumstances put you in that position of being able to say, sometimes doesn't even have to be somebody really well known, that for some reason confides in you, maybe because they don't know you that well, that you tell them, oh really? And you don't dismiss them, and you say, wow, you know what, I've heard of this man, and this is his website address, why don't you check it out? Because that's the way it works. Sometimes it's that one little thing that changes the outcome. That is the way of the light worker. That is the way good works. Goodness works. Okay, the chance encounter, the one kindness, that's sometimes how it works. It doesn't always necessarily have to be a headliner, in other words. So anyway, guys, I hope you like the show. What do you think of my unicorn headset? I get these because, let's face it, some of this subject matter is a little bit dark, and or it reminds me not to take myself seriously. But anyway, guys, thank you for being part of my audience. You're all wonderful. In case by the time you listen to it, happy holidays, Merry Christmas. And we didn't get to talk to Bill about Happy Thanksgiving. And all those, Happy New Year. I'm not sure when I'll stagger the show, but anyway, guys, thank you for being part of my audience. I really appreciate it. Take care.